And now, the best 60-ish seconds of your week.
And as spring training gets into full swing, and we're all happy to see that, back in Washington, D.C., Hunter Biden goes behind closed doors this week to finally give some testimony. And we're going to see the transcript retold. And additionally, there's now going to be a public hearing, apparently, involving Hunter Biden. And his credibility is, as we all know, shot. He's telling people that the reason he did certain things was because he was under the influence of drugs, et cetera, et cetera. This is simply not a credible story. We still have to know who the big guy was, how he was connected to these really nefarious enterprises of the other Bidens, and how people with no apparent experience, acumen, or qualifications were getting tens of millions of dollars from overseas governments, most of whom were hostile to the United States. And Nikki Haley soldiers on despite another really devastating defeat in the Michigan primary. I mean, she's not even competitive, and yet she says, I'm continuing on to the next level. This time it will be Super Tuesday, which is just ahead of us, and we'll have to see where she thinks she can go after that. I mean, ultimately, you've got to win primaries to be in the competition, and she hasn't won any. You know, some of my old friends tell me, remember Ronald Reagan, he lost 6 or 7 in a row. He did, but then he had an issue that clearly divided him from his Republican opponent at the time, an incumbent president, Jerry Ford. And he drove that issue with great success. Nikki Haley doesn't have an issue. She simply is saying Donald Trump ultimately can't get elected in the fall, and bluntly, the Republican electorate isn't buying that. So the question becomes, what is the off-ramp for her? How does she exit this race? If she'd asked me, I would have told her to do it before the South Carolina primary, her home state where she got embarrassed. But at this juncture, you've got to say, where is there any light at the end of the tunnel for her? So my guess is that after Super Tuesday, she's out. Donald Trump is the nominee, and the Democrats continue to look for who will ultimately be theirs, because I continue to believe it will not be Joe Biden. And both Joe Biden and Donald Trump paid a visit to the southern border this week, another indication of how dramatically important immigration and the southern border is to voters. Normally, the economy trumps everything else, but this year, virtually every poll says that the border and the security of our borders, particularly the southern one, is first and foremost in voters' minds, and with good reason. The 10 million illegal immigrants that have entered this country since Joe Biden took over is really a frightening number when you stop and think about it, for a whole lot of reasons. Not only national security, but the stress that those 10 million people, almost the population of Pennsylvania, add to every system in the United States is overwhelming. And you've now got Eric Adams, hardly a conservative, mayor of New York, saying this sanctuary city stuff doesn't work out. But in my home state, Pennsylvania, Lancaster City, much smaller than New York, says, let's have another sanctuary city. I mean, this really is frightening, because the stress that that puts on a city that already has a homeless population problem, and additional demands on social service and public safety come to the fore, because we've seen this week some really horrific things committed by illegal immigrants. And my Democrat counterpart on the air says, oh, well, this is about protecting people. Protecting them from what? Because ultimately the only protection that sanctuary cities provide is against law enforcement. And enforcing the law is really, really important to resolving the problem of illegal immigration and controlling our borders. Briefly, the Supreme Court of the United States has agreed to take up the question of presidential immunity. Donald Trump and his legal team asked the court to do that. They said yes. This will delay some of the criminal actions against Donald Trump. How far down the road it will push them remains to be seen. And what the court will ultimately say is obviously an open question. My guess is that they're going to say that there's some limited liability, but that it's not pervasive and all-encompassing, as it would be if it were civil immunity. Finally, the Republican leader in the United States Senate, Mitch McConnell, announced this week that he's stepping down. The longest-serving leader, party leader in United States Senate history, is going to step down. Now, look, I know that some people in my party have real problems with Mitch McConnell, and some of those are justified. A lot of folks call him a rhino, etc. But this much I do know. If it weren't for Mitch McConnell, the federal judiciary would look very, very different than it does today. Justice Kavanaugh wouldn't be on the Supreme Court. Merrick Garland would. It was Mitch McConnell that stopped the Garland nomination, and it was Mitch McConnell that shepherded through Gorsuch, Kavanaugh, and Amy Coney Barrett. So there are things to be very thankful to Mitch McConnell for, and the criticisms can be fair too. You know, we're taping this on the 29th of February because this is leap year, so hopefully that's a good omen for all. And again, we just ask you to take 1 second to like, share, and subscribe. Like, share, and subscribe because it really does help build our audience. It's growing every week, and we hope that folks enjoy this as you do, because for now, that is the best 60-ish seconds of your week.